Hi, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of the Ashon Show, where we are highlighting a case study. And today we have got Pete Marsh here, a great friend from Long Beach, California, who's a microgrid developer and active volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm also a member of Citizens Climate Lobby and Climate Reality Project, 350 Degree, and other groups. And with CCL, he's the leader of the Long Beach chapter and co-leader of the National Electrification Action Team. And Pete, we are so happy you are here and going to share about your Craftsman electrification. What a gorgeous home.
Great. Good afternoon, Tristan. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. I'm ready to dive right in whenever you are, but my wife and I bought this house about 3 years ago, and it's been a really interesting case study and project in electrification because it's a 100-year-old existing home. We're running into many of the challenges that we're going to run into across the country.
Absolutely, Pete. That's why it's so great that you're sharing your story. And the fact that you did this is going to pave the way for so many others to see the importance of electrification, and that you're sharing your story this way so that anyone can watch it at any time and get some great tips. We're also going to hopefully share the PowerPoint as well to everybody. So please stay in touch, and let's take it away, Pete. Tell us what you did.
Okay, fantastic. Absolutely. And the slides will be available. And we're going to have both this short version that we're recording right now, and also I will record a longer version going into detail on some of the many places we stubbed our toes and ran into little issues here and there. So anyway, first off, you see a picture here of our house. This is a small Craftsman in Long Beach, California, California climate zone 6. So it's a very mild climate. We're half a mile from the ocean. But it's interesting, we have a 1,600 square foot main house that you can see. And then in the back, you can see the ADU, accessory dwelling unit, which is a 1-bedroom above a 3-car garage. And we have 2 electrical meters, and separate for each one. The main house is what I'm going to talk about mostly. We are electrifying both places, but this discussion focuses on the main house. It's my wife and I now. Our kids are out of the house, and we have also 2 tenants in the ADU. We've been in the house exactly 3 years right now. We bought in month 1 of the pandemic. We bought the house from a flipper who he did add insulation to the south wall, which is the one you see sunlit behind the fence and gate here. And that wall was deteriorated after 100 years by the sunlight. So they had to replace the siding. While they did that, they put insulation in. But that's the only place in the whole house where there's any insulation. And we'll talk a little bit about the challenges that brings to any energy project. We started by having an energy model done, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But the short story is, after some computerized modeling and a lot of discussion, we decided we would insulate the attic, but not insulate the other walls nor the subfloor, and we would seal some leaks. And that was, in our mild climate zone, that was sufficient weatherization to help. And then you can see in my bottom bullet, we consider that we've completed 5 of our 7 electrification projects along the way. And we have pictures of each of those. And those include adding solar and a battery, upgrading the main breaker panel, and then electrifying the 4 main appliances in the house: the space heating, water heating, laundry and cooking, and electric cars. So with that as an introduction, when we bought the house, we knew we were buying a shall we say, experienced electrical system. This is literally on the right-hand side is the 100-year-old electrical box. And that fed into knob and tube wiring, which is still abandoned in place. And there's some cloth wiring in the house. In our case, we're fortunate because the flipper, while they had some interior walls open, they replaced all of the electrical wiring inside the house. So we have current code compliant wiring, grounded outlets, and all that, which is an important thing. But Rewiring America points out that up to 48 million US homes out of the 122 million households nationwide, nearly half are going to need upgrades to their electrical panels when they are electrified. Another half can electrify with their existing panels. So from that rusty panel that you saw previously, we replaced it with this dual meter panel that you see in the center. And that feeds into the 3 sub panels that you see on the right and the left of this slide. And I took the covers off so that we can see what the contractors did in there. One interesting note on the right-hand side, this is the main sub panel in the main house. And you can see that the majority of the wires run up into the attic, and then they run to all the other lights and receptacles and appliances around the house. Notice that 2 of the wires of cables are wrapped in blue and purple tape. And then down at the bottom right, there's one wrapped in orange tape. And that is what Rewiring America loves to call pre-wiring. So when we did this main breaker panel, that was one of the first steps in our electrification journey. And we knew we had to have the wall opened up to get access. And so while we had that, and before we put the insulation into the attic, we went ahead and ran wires to the locations where in the future we will put electric versions of other machines. And so the wiring itself added a couple of $100 to the initial project, but it prevented having to do all of the wall opening and construction in subsequent parts of the electrification projects. This is our attic. And so this was the first of the machines in our house that we converted from gas to electric. This is the old gas furnace that had been in the house for a few years before the flipper bought it. And then the flipper made some modifications. And as a result, even though they had it inspected, when I had a problem with the furnace, the contractor told me we had 7 code violations. And I won't go through them all, but you can see my little red circles here for where all the code violations are. But you can see on the nameplate of the furnace over here to the right that this is rated at 88,000 BTUs per hour, which is a medium to slightly above average furnace for residential use. And you can see the ductwork going out. It goes to 9 different registers in different rooms of the house. Well, the next thing we did is we insulated the attic, as I mentioned earlier, thanks to that energy model that we had done. But we decided it was not cost effective in our case to insulate the walls and the crawl space. And so the attic used to look like this with messy 100 years of debris from people having left storage items in there. There was good quality flooring in about 50% of the attic space, as you can see in the upper right-hand picture. But we removed that because the flipper had run gas piping and water piping and electrical wires all across the floor of the attic instead of underneath. And we wanted to use this space. As you can see in the lower right, it has turned into a wonderful she shed for our 3 granddaughters who live nearby. And so we definitely had to get all the mechanical systems hidden underneath of new flooring. And then on the lower left, you can see the blown in insulation. And the insulation is mounted up 12 to 18 inches deep in the areas, the wings of the attic, which don't have any flooring, but in a section where the contractor is standing and that you see elsewhere, the insulation is about 6 inches thick and then covered by flooring. Tristan, I'm going to pause there for just a minute and see if you have any questions.
Well, I wanted to find out just a little bit about, the cost of upgrading that panel, because
sure.
that sometimes seems to be a challenge for most folks.
Absolutely. So, the panel that was there when we moved in was this 2 meters, and you can see to some degree that there's this very small set of main circuit breakers underneath, and we replaced that with the much larger dual meter panel combination that you see here. And the cost of the complete panel upgrade was $4,500. Now that's above average. A typical price to have a contractor replace your electrical panel in most parts of the United States is between $1,500 to $2,500, according to Rewiring America. Mine was roughly twice that, in part because it's a double panel. It's serving 2 residential units and has 2 electrical meters. And there are fat cables coming out from these 2 meters in the center, one feeding the panel in the main house on the right, and the other feeding the accessory dwelling unit panel on the left there. And so we decided to upgrade the sub panels as well as the main panel, because we knew we were going to an all-electric world and we wanted to have plenty of physical and electrical capacity in the breaker panel. And so when you hear people talk about breaker panel capacity, you do have to consider both of those things. Number one is the physical number of circuit breakers that can fit into it. And this panel on the right is called a 3040 circuit breaker panel. It has 30 physical spaces for circuit breakers, but since some of those breakers can be half height or miniaturized, you can fit a total of 40 electrical circuits in there. And that's going to be more than enough for anything we do in our 1,600 square foot house.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we can jump back to where we were. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. So I've talked already about our space heating and about insulating. And the next thing I'll talk about is one of the 2 remaining projects that we haven't completed yet, but we're eager for it. So when we moved in, the water heater was this style that you see in the center picture. It's a tankless gas-fired water heater. You can see the yellow pipe coming out of the wall that comes from the gas supply system. And then there's hot water and cold water pipes going out of and into the water heater there. And we have one on the wall for the main house and another one for the apartment. And but we want to eliminate those greenhouse gas emissions from burning the natural gas there. And so we are going to replace those with this style of water heater that you see in the lower right. These are 3 models of heat pump water heater, and they look very much like the 50 and 60 gallon tank water heaters that we're used to seeing for the last few decades. Many of those are fired by gas, and a lot are electric resistance type. Well, the heat pump water heaters have a heat exchanger here in the bonnet at the top. You don't even really notice it, but the tank stops about 3/4 of the way up. And the heat pump does what heat pumps do. It takes heat from the outside air and moves it into the water. And so we'll be installing one of these sometime within the next year or 2. We're following Rewiring America's advice on all of this, because one of the points that they make that's really important is we would all love to be able to electrify our appliances and our lives immediately. But if all of us tried to go out and buy new heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and induction cooktops today or tomorrow, there are not enough on the shelves in the supply system for us to be able to do that. So the advice from Rewiring America is, oh, apologies, my
All good.
computer
All good.
showed a different screen for a minute. So the advice from Rewiring America is you don't need to replace your machine immediately. It's going to continue emitting greenhouse gases, but each of us as household heads and households and as business owners have made capital investments in the machines that we currently have in our homes and businesses, and we expected a return on those investments. So we can, in reasonably good conscience, we can let those machines continue to serve out their useful life. But when the gas-fired machines in our lives and in our businesses reach their end of life, by all means, replace the gas machines with electric ones. And that is, if we do that across our homes, including our transport, our cars, and our small businesses, those together can address decarbonization of 60 to 65% of the United States economy. That's the scale of the opportunity that we have as decision makers in this environment. So let's see. A couple of other comments on the water heater before I go ahead. First, when the flipper bought the house a year or two before we moved in, you can see in the lower left, there was a tank style water heater, but just stuck outside the house, kind of a wall wart in the driveway, actually. And they replaced that with these tankless on different walls of the house, more out of the way. We will use an external compartment, something like this, for our tanked water heater because we don't have enough space inside the house anywhere to put the new tanked water heater. But that's fine. You can put these heat pump water heaters in a well-protected shelter outside, but you do have to make sure it's well ventilated because they need to exchange heat with the outside air.
Yeah, that's a good point, Pete. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, the other thing is, I mentioned earlier pre-wiring, and we do have in the location where we're going to put the heat pump water heater in the future, which is near the existing tankless gas water heater. We have run electrical wire up into the attic, out the attic, down the wall, and into, it's terminated in an electrical box sitting here next to the gas tankless water heater, just waiting for the new electric water heater to be plugged in. So our installation costs in the future will be substantially lower because of that pre-wiring. And that was simply 8-gauge wire on a 30 amp circuit breaker. That's the size for almost all of the heat pump water heaters out there. And there are, as Sean loves to point out on his shows, there are increasing options for water heating on a watt diet. If you don't have a 240 volt circuit available, you can plug into a 120 volt circuit. You just won't have as fast a recovery rate, but once you've heated up the water in the tank, you'll be just fine. Okay, so this is the other part of our electrification journey that is still pending. We have not yet replaced our gas stove. And this we're going to do pretty soon. Number one, because we're excited about how much nicer it is to cook on induction than on gas, which is counter to all the myths that you hear about out there. So we're going to do a little myth busting, but also for health. You see Olivia there, our middle granddaughter, marching through the kitchen with her drum. And you can see that on our gas stove, we have those protective covers covering all of the knobs, which is one of the ways we try to protect children from safety issues. But gas stoves present not just the respiratory health issues that we know about, where a child growing up in a house with gas cooking is 42% more likely to have asthma than a child in a non-gas kitchen. And so for both of those reasons, the respiratory health and for just plain old safety, we're eager to make this our next project. In the meantime, we do have something that many of us are using already. Tristan, I know you told me that you're using an induction countertop hob. This is basically the same way many of us went through college, cooking our ramen and tea and coffee on a single burner electric hot plate, only now it's magnetic instead of coil resistance burners. And we love ours. And we had one for a while, and then my mother-in-law had a problem with her built-in electric cooktop that's 30 years old and reached its end of life, but it is unfortunately built into a granite countertop in such a way that the only way you can get it out is to destroy the countertop. So that was a poor choice of craftsmanship at the time, but she's solving that problem with a $90 electric induction cooktop burner. So in this case, you can see where our stove is. It's just a push-in, a slide-in style range with gas for both the cooktop and the oven. But it will slide right out, as you can sort of see from the picture on the right. And then on the lower left, I took a picture underneath, and we have good news there. In that there is space in the wall for a new electrical outlet. It's plugged in right now to a 120 volt outlet, but just like with the water heater, we have done pre-wiring to the location of the range, and on the outside of the wall, there's a box with the electrical wires for 240 volts waiting to power the future induction stove. And the stoves are one of the highest draw of the electrical devices. My heat pump operates on a 20 amp circuit breaker. Our heat pump water heater will be on a 30 amp circuit breaker. Our electric clothes dryer is on a 40 amp circuit breaker, and that's because its resistance. A heat pump water heater would need a smaller breaker. But cooking, because we basically plan, in the case of our stoves, we plan for the worst case, that we might be cooking on 4 or 5 burners at the same time and have the oven going. And if you have all of those burners and the oven going all at once, then you're going to need a 50 amp circuit breaker, and in the case of a few stoves, up to 60 amps. And so we ran wire from a 60 amp breaker, and I think it's 6 gauge wire coming over to this location. So those are some of the things you have to ask an electrician in detail if you're trying to do the pre-wiring. Tristan, did I cover all the good news with?
Yeah, I think you have, and you know, the health reasons as well, and also just not only for children but for all of us, having a gas stove, even if you're not even really using it or using it some, you need to make sure that extractor is on. And even then, it's like you're living with somebody who's smoking in your home 24/7. And so that's why it's really important to look at it. And induction cooking is so much better. I absolutely love it. And everything simmers just right and cooks well and is even more delicious. And I don't have those fumes on. The other day, one of our kids actually accidentally hit the knobs, and so gas was fuming through our house, you know, and that's why you have detectors. CTO, you know, you have those carbon monoxide detectors is because of that gas. And if people kind of connect that with their stove, if that's the one thing they can do, that's a huge thing, is to replace their stove, and do it early. Start thinking about it. If you're at the end of life for any of your appliances, go ahead and start getting the bids together. Go ahead and start looking for it so that you've got a couple months in advance to make sure the appliance comes in, you can get a contractor. So some of those forward thinking things that you've done, is a fantastic way to approach a project like this and taking your time with it. It's so much more doable that way. Thank you so much, Pete. Let's keep going.
Yeah, okay. You're very welcome. And just though to follow up on the exhaust hoods, those are so critical. You pointed out that even with a good exhaust hood, having gas in your house is like being with a heavy smoker and secondhand smoke. All right. So this was one of the easier things that we did when we bought the house. The flipper had run gas piping that you can see over on the middle left there. And he had run gas piping over to the location where the dryer would need to go, and had it all plumbed in. And the flipper did all of this plumbing and work. It would have been so much easier if the flipper had just run, instead of running a gas line, all they needed to do was run a 10 or 8 gauge wire instead from a 240 volt circuit breaker. But that's not the way the flipper chose to do it. And that's one of the issues that we face in nationwide, is the knowledge gap. And most of the people in the trades, in HVAC and in plumbing and in electrical trades, have come up through their careers during a time when our conventional wisdom was, and the truth was, it was more efficient and less expensive to cook and to heat our houses with gas than with electricity. And the really exciting thing is that over the last decade and a little longer, induction cooking and heat pumps have just turned that conventional wisdom upside down. And they are so efficient and so much more effective that it's now better in every way to have electrified machines in your home. But we have a huge education challenge in front of us that all of us on this call are well aware of, and doing our part to spread the word in. So I just, in order to install the electric clothes dryer that we already owned, when we got there, we had an electric clothes dryer in a location that wanted a gas dryer. So I decided not to bother pulling off the sheetrock on the wall, because this is in a garage and I wasn't worried about pretty. And so we just ran conduit on the surface of the wall from the garage breaker panel over to this big receptacle where the dryer is plugged in. So those are the trade-offs you can make in a place that's less prettiful.
That's great.
Okay. And so here's the summary. We've seen all but 2 of these up close now. And so I'll just spend a minute talking about adding renewable electricity and a battery to this house. So here's an interesting thing. I am a solar contractor by day, but I'm also I'm 60 and I'm winding down the construction side of my business. And so I looked at those facts. And when we did this, there are solar companies out there who've driven down their prices so low that their price is only 10 or 15% above my cost as a low volume contractor. And so I had another contractor install this. So you see solar panels going in on the roof here, and we have panels on the roof of the main house and of the apartment. And we're feeding both properties through the single solar system. And then in the bottom right, you can see the sort of the guts and the brains of the system getting installed. We've seen the main breaker panel before. That's over here at the far right. But then the technicians to the left are installing the 2 inverters for the solar, the communications gateway, and then with the white cover on it, you can see behind that the battery. And so that lets us be good stewards of the grid, as well as of the electricity that we create from our solar system.
Pete, I absolutely love your story of making the switch and that you're still going to be able to come back and share more about the things that you're doing as you progress as well. And we're hopefully going to be recording a longer version of the whole story to go more in depth so that people can have, more of a guide to everything that you can do. And we absolutely Rewiring America is such a phenomenal resource. Also, the Switches On program, which is a statewide program, is another fantastic resource. And your neighbors, keep talking about it. The more we talk about it, the more we spread the word, like Pete is doing, the more that we can see this, making the switch can be much easier, much more affordable, bring health to our homes, and reduce, and stabilize our energy costs, as well as, saving this beautiful planet for all of us.
All right. Well, Tristan, I had a delightful time. Thank you very much. And when we do record the longer version, here's a little sneak peek for everybody. One of the things we'll be talking about in more detail is the energy model that I mentioned. I'll go into that in a little more detail for folks. I'll go into a little more detail on some of the issues and discussions we had with each of the pieces of this. And then finally, and probably highest on everybody's mind, is I'll go into detail on the cost breakdown. And one of the exciting things there is the cost of running our home machines on electricity now is substantially less than the cost of running them on gas. And again, that's thanks to the magic of heat pumps and their incredible efficiency, and the fact that we've all seen gas prices shoot up in the last year for a number of geopolitical reasons and supply reasons. But I, like most people, think that fossil fuel prices in general, while they've always been volatile, are just almost certain to continue to increase and become even more volatile. So electrification is also the perfect way to prevent ourselves from those price spikes. And one last comment about the cost with electrified appliances. I'll have a breakdown for each appliance, comparing that appliance over 5 years or 10 years to the gas appliance cost, and also the summary for the whole house, including our electric car. And it's really exciting when you look at it that way. The payback is usually in just a few years. All right.
Yeah, I love it. I love not having to go to a gas station, but I also think, if that's not in someone's future right now, there's a lot of other ways to electrify and also advocate for electrification by checking out Save Solar. That's a wonderful organization that is pulling hundreds of environmental and California groups across the state to make sure that our voices are heard as legislation is going through the state legislature and the California Public Utilities Commission, because we need to have a voice in our energy future. And that's something that we don't want to see taken away. So you guys can stay in touch with us. We'll keep sharing more ways that you can learn about electrification and stay involved on this issue. It's one of the biggest ways that we can reduce emissions. Plus, at home, it's such a more comfortable experience too. You have just the right temperature. Your homes are warm and cozy or cool and comfortable. So, and you find that the way you're cooking is much more, it's so delicious and so much easier for me at least. And also washing and drying clothes, everything is just so much more streamlined and reliable. So I think all the points you've made are just incredible. And I can't wait to do the longer version and do a deep, deep dive into this project. And what a gorgeous home. I can't wait to be invited over, Pete.
All right. We'll do it. All right. Thanks again, Tristan. Take care.
You take care too.